The flour dust hung thick in the air of the trading post, catching the afternoon light that streamed through the grimy windows of Spokane, Washington Territory. And Beatrice Harper knew her father was about to do something terrible when he grabbed her arm and dragged her toward the counter where Samuel Hopkins weighed goods on his brass scales. She was 20 years old, born in 1855 and raised in the shadow of the Cascade Mountains. And in all those years, she had never seen her father look quite so desperate as he did that September day in 1875. His eyes were bloodshot from drinking rotgut whiskey for 3 days straight. His hands trembled, and when he threw her forward like she was nothing more than a piece of merchandise, she stumbled and caught herself on the rough wooden counter. "I will take that 50-pound sack of flour for the girl," her father said, his voice slurred but determined. "And maybe some coffee too if you are feeling generous, Hopkins." Samuel Hopkins was a fat man with thin lips that curved downward in perpetual disapproval, and he looked Beatrice up and down like she was a horse he was considering purchasing. She felt her face burn with shame, but she kept her chin up because her mother had taught her that much before dying of consumption 2 winters past. Her mother had been a good woman, a strong woman, and Beatrice would not dishonor her memory by weeping in front of these men who saw her as nothing more than a commodity to be bartered. "She is scrawny," Hopkins said, reaching out to grab her chin and turn her face from side to side. "Probably cannot cook worth a damn either. I will give you the flour and nothing else." "Deal," her father said without hesitation, and Beatrice felt something inside her chest crack like ice on a frozen lake. Hopkins went into the back room to fetch the sack of flour, and Beatrice turned to look at her father, searching his weathered face for any sign of the man who had once carried her on his shoulders through fields of wildflowers, who had taught her to recognize the call of a meadowlark, who had smiled when she brought him pretty stones from the creek. That man was gone, drowned in whiskey and grief, replaced by this hollow shell who could trade his only daughter for something as common as flour. "You are not my father anymore," she said quietly, and he flinched as though she had struck him. "Beatrice, I got no choice. Winter is coming and I got nothing. You understand that, do not you?" "I understand that you are a coward," she said. And then Hopkins was back with the flour sack slung over his shoulder, and her father grabbed it like it was more precious than gold, more valuable than his own flesh and blood. The door to the trading post swung open, letting in a gust of cool autumn air and a tall man who had to duck slightly to clear the frame. Beatrice noticed him peripherally, but she was too focused on watching her father shuffle toward the exit, the flour sack leaving a white trail behind him like the ghost of their relationship. "Wait just a goddamn minute," the tall man said, and his voice was deep and carried the authority of someone used to being heard. "Did I just hear what I think I heard? Did you just sell your daughter for flour?" Her father paused at the door, his shoulders hunched. "Ain't none of your business, stranger." The tall man crossed the room in 3 long strides, and Beatrice finally got a proper look at him. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore dusty trail clothes and a gun belt that sat low on his hips, the leather worn smooth from use. There was something about the set of his jaw that suggested he did not back down from much, and when he looked at her father, his expression was one of pure disgust. "I am making it my business," he said. "That is a human being you just traded away, not a cow." "She is my daughter and I will do with her as I please," her father said, but his voice wavered. The stranger turned to Hopkins. "How much for the girl?" Hopkins rubbed his chin, his beady eyes calculating. "Well now, seeing as how I just acquired her, I suppose I could be persuaded to part with her for the right price." "I will give you $50, the stranger said, Beatrice felt her stomach twist. She was being sold again, passed from one owner to another like a piece of furniture. She wanted to scream, to run, to do anything other than stand there and be discussed, as though she had no say in her own fate. $50, Hopkins sputtered. Why, that is highway robbery. She is worth at least 100. She is not worth anything because people are not commodities, the stranger said, his voice hard as granite. But since you seem determined to treat her like one, I will pay you $50 and not a penny more. Take it, or I will go to the territorial marshal and report you for engaging in slavery, which last I checked was illegal even out here in Washington Territory. Hopkins paled slightly. The stranger clearly knew that the law was murky when it came to such transactions, but the threat was enough. Hopkins was the type of man who avoided trouble with the authorities, preferring to conduct his less savory business in the shadows. Fine, Hopkins muttered. $50. The stranger pulled a leather pouch from his pocket and counted out the money in gold coins, each one clinking onto the counter with a sound that made Beatrice flinch. When the transaction was complete, he turned to her, and his expression softened. My name is Zachary Vance, he said. And you do not belong to me, understand? I just bought your freedom, that is all. You can come with me and I will give you work and a place to stay, or you can walk out that door and never see me again. The choice is yours. Beatrice stared at him, trying to understand what sort of man would spend $50 on a stranger's freedom with no expectation of return. In her experience, men always wanted something, always had an angle. But when she looked into Zachary Vance's eyes, she saw no deception, only a fierce kind of honesty that was rare as gold in these parts. I have nowhere else to go, she said finally, so I suppose I will come with you. Fair enough, he said. Let me finish my business here and then we will head out. Her father had left while the negotiations were taking place, slinking away like the coward he was, and Beatrice felt a strange sense of relief that she did not have to look at him anymore. Zachary purchased supplies from Hopkins, who served him with barely concealed resentment, and then they walked out into the late afternoon sunshine. Zachary's horse was a big buckskin gelding with intelligent eyes and a calm disposition. Zachary loaded his supplies into the saddlebags and then looked at Beatrice. Can you ride? Yes, she said. My mother taught me. Good. We have a ways to go and I would rather not walk it. He swung up into the saddle with easy grace and then reached down to help her up behind him. Beatrice hesitated for just a moment before taking his hand. His grip was strong and calloused, the hand of a man who worked hard for his living, and he pulled her up as though she weighed nothing at all. She settled behind him, acutely aware of the proximity, of the solid warmth of his back against her chest. Where are we going? She asked as they rode out of Spokane, heading east toward the rolling hills that stretched toward the Idaho border. My ranch, Zachary said. It is about 15 miles from here. Nothing fancy, but it is home. And what will I do there? Whatever you want, he said. I could use help with cooking and mending and such if you are willing. I will pay you fair wages and you will have your own room. If you decide it is not to your liking, I will take you to the nearest town and you can make your own way. Beatrice did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing at all. They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the steady clip-clop of the horses' hooves and the whisper of wind through the tall grass. The landscape was beautiful in the fading light, all golden and amber, with the mountains rising in the distance like ancient sentinels. Why did you do it? She asked finally. Why did you pay for me? Zachary was quiet for so long that she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and thoughtful. My sister was sold by our stepfather when she was 16, he said. traded her to a trapper for a wagon and a team of oxen. I was too young to stop it, too small to fight him. I have spent every day since then wishing I could go back and change things. When I saw your father doing the same thing to you, I could not just walk away. I had to do something. What happened to your sister?" "I do not know," he said, and the pain in his voice was palpable. "I have been looking for her for 10 years, but the trail went cold in Montana territory. I hope she is alive somewhere, living a good life, but I will probably never know for sure." Beatrice felt something shift inside her, a loosening of the tight knot of anger and fear that had been sitting in her chest since her father grabbed her arm in the trading post. Zachary Vance was not her savior or her owner. He was just a man trying to right an old wrong, and she could respect that. "I am sorry about your sister," she said. "Thank you," he said. "And I am sorry about your father. He stopped being my father the moment he traded me for flour," Beatrice said, and she was surprised by how steady her voice was. "I will not waste any more tears on him." They reached the ranch just as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that took Beatrice's breath away. The ranch house was small but sturdy, built from rough-hewn logs with a stone chimney that rose from one end. There was a barn nearby, a chicken coop, and a corral where several horses milled about. It was modest, but it looked like it had been built with care, and Beatrice felt something unfamiliar stir in her chest. Hope, perhaps, or maybe just the faint possibility of a future that did not involve being traded like livestock. Zachary dismounted and helped her down, and she stood for a moment looking around, taking it all in. The air smelled like pine and wood smoke, and somewhere in the distance a coyote howled, the sound lonely and wild. "Come on," Zachary said. "Let me show you around before it gets too dark." He led her into the house, which consisted of a main room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen area, and 2 smaller rooms off to the side. The furniture was simple but well made, and everything was surprisingly clean for a bachelor's dwelling. Zachary seemed to notice her looking around with approval. "I try to keep things tidy," he said, sounding almost embarrassed. "My mother raised me right, even if my stepfather was a piece of work." He showed her to one of the smaller rooms, which contained a bed with a quilt, a small dresser, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. It was more than Beatrice had dared hope for, and she felt her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "This is yours," Zachary said. "The door has a latch on the inside so you can lock it if you want privacy. I will not bother you, I give you my word." "Thank you," Beatrice said, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. That first night, Beatrice lay in the unfamiliar bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling around her. She heard Zachary moving around in the main room, the crackle of the fire, the soft sounds of him preparing for bed. She expected to feel afraid or uncertain, but instead she felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time in months, maybe even years, she felt safe. The next morning, Beatrice woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. She dressed quickly in her worn calico dress and went out to the main room, where Zachary was standing at the stove, cooking breakfast. He looked up when she entered and gave her a small smile. "Morning," he said. "Hope you slept well." "I did," she said. "Thank you." "I figured we could talk over breakfast about what you might want to do around here," he said, dishing eggs and bacon onto 2 tin plates. "But there is no pressure. If you just want to rest today, that is fine too." They sat at the rough wooden table and ate, and Beatrice found herself studying him in the morning light. He had a strong face, not handsome in the conventional sense, but attractive in a rugged way that suited the landscape. His hands were scarred and work-worn, and he ate with the efficient movements of someone who spent most of his time alone. "I can cook," Beatrice said. "And clean and mend and do laundry. My mother taught me all of it before she passed." "That would be helpful," Zachary said. "I have been doing my own cooking for 3 years now, and I will be the first to admit I am not very good at it. But like I said yesterday, I will pay you fair wages. $1 a day plus room and board. Does that sound acceptable?" $1 a day was more than generous for domestic work, and Beatrice felt her eyes widen. "That is too much." "It is what your work is worth," Zachary said firmly, "and I will not hear any argument about it." So Beatrice began her new life on the ranch, and the days fell into a comfortable rhythm. She woke early and made breakfast, then cleaned the house and tended the vegetable garden that grew behind the cabin. She mended Zachary's shirts and darned his socks, and in the afternoons she often baked bread or prepared stew for dinner. Zachary worked from dawn until dusk, tending his cattle and horses, mending fences, and doing the 1,000 other tasks that came with running a ranch. At first they were polite and formal with each other, like strangers sharing a stagecoach, but gradually they began to talk. Zachary told her about growing up in Missouri, about his mother who died when he was 12, about his stepfather who drank and gambled away everything of value, including his sister. He told her about coming west at 16 with nothing but a horse and a dream, about working as a ranch hand and saving every penny until he could buy his own land. Beatrice told him about her childhood in Spokane, about her mother who had been educated and taught Beatrice to read and write, about her father who had been a good man once but lost himself in grief after her mother died. She told him about the long, lonely months after her mother's death, watching her father spiral into despair and drink, feeling helpless to stop it. "I kept thinking he would get better," she said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set. "I kept believing that one day he would wake up and be himself again. I was foolish." "You were hopeful," Zachary said. "That is not the same as foolish. It felt foolish when he dragged me into that trading post." "What he did was about him, not you," Zachary said. "You cannot control other people's choices, only your own." Beatrice thought about that for a long time, and slowly she began to release the guilt and shame she had been carrying. It was not her fault that her father had sold her. She had done nothing to deserve that treatment. And gradually, as the weeks passed and autumn deepened into winter, she began to feel like herself again, like a person with value and agency rather than a commodity to be traded. She also began to notice things about Zachary that she had been too numb to see at first. The way he was unfailingly gentle with the animals, even when they were being difficult. The way he always thanked her for meals, no matter how simple. The way he sang softly to himself when he thought no one was listening, old songs his mother had taught him. The way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, which was happening more and more often. And she noticed the way he looked at her sometimes, when he thought she was not paying attention. There was something in his gaze that made her pulse quicken, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire crackling in the hearth. Winter came early that year, with snow falling in thick white curtains that blanketed the land and made the ranch feel like its own small world, isolated and peaceful. Zachary taught Beatrice to milk the cow and gather eggs from the chickens, and they worked together to ensure the animals were comfortable in the cold. On the worst days, when the wind howled like a living thing and the snow piled up against the walls, they stayed inside and Beatrice read aloud from the books Zachary kept on a shelf above the fireplace. It was during one of those reading sessions, with Beatrice sitting in the rocking chair and Zachary stretched out on the rug near the fire, that she realized she was falling in love with him. The realization came quietly, not with fanfare or drama, but with a simple certainty that felt as natural as breathing. She loved the sound of his laughter, the steadiness of his presence, the way he treated her like an equal rather than a subordinate. She loved his kindness and his integrity, the way he worked so hard to build something good in this wild place. But she did not know how he felt about her, and she was afraid to ask. What if she was misreading his kindness for something more? What if he saw her only as an employee, someone he had helped out of obligation to his lost sister? The thought of losing what they had, this comfortable companionship, was too frightening to risk. It was Zachary who finally broke the tension between them, on a cold December evening when the world outside was frozen and still. Beatrice was washing the dinner dishes, and he was supposed to be working on a bridle that needed mending, but when she glanced over, she found him watching her with an intensity that made her hands still in the soapy water. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "I need to tell you something," he said, setting aside the bridle and standing up. "And I am just going to say it plain because I am not good at fancy words." Her heart began to pound. "All right. I am in love with you," he said, crossing the room to stand near her. "I think I have been for a while now, but I did not want to say anything because I did not want to make you uncomfortable. You came here under difficult circumstances, and I never wanted you to feel obligated to me in any way. But I cannot keep it to myself anymore. I love you, Beatrice. I love your strength and your kindness and your laugh. I love the way you hum when you are cooking and the way you talk to the chickens like they are your friends. I love everything about you, and if you do not feel the same way, I will understand and nothing has to change. But I had to tell you." Beatrice felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears, happy tears. She dried her hands on her apron and turned to face him fully. "I love you too," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I was so afraid you did not feel the same way." Zachary let out a breath that was half laugh, half sigh of relief. "Really, really," she said, and then he was closing the distance between them, taking her face gently in his work-roughened hands and kissing her with a tenderness that made her knees weak. It was not her first kiss, but it was the first one that mattered, the first one that felt like a promise of something real and lasting. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling like fools. "I want to marry you," Zachary said, "if you will have me. I know it has not been very long, and I know I do not have much to offer, but I will spend every day of my life making you happy if you will let me." "You have already made me happy," Beatrice said, "and yes, I will marry you." They were married in Spokane 3 weeks later, in a small ceremony at the church with the minister's wife and the schoolteacher as witnesses. Beatrice wore a dress that the minister's wife helped her make from blue fabric that Zachary bought at the general store, and Zachary wore his cleanest shirt and a string tie. It was simple and perfect, and when Zachary slipped a gold ring onto her finger, Beatrice felt like the luckiest woman in the territory. The ride back to the ranch as husband and wife felt different somehow, charged with new meaning and possibility. When they arrived home, Zachary carried her over the threshold even though she laughed and protested that it was not necessary. That night, in the bed they now shared, Zachary was gentle and patient, and Beatrice discovered that love could be expressed not just in words and gestures but in the meeting of bodies, in the creation of something greater than the sum of its parts. The winter passed in a haze of happiness, and when spring came and the snow melted to reveal the green shoots of new grass, Beatrice felt like she was watching the world be born anew. She and Zachary worked side by side, planting a larger garden, repairing the winter damage to the barn, planning for the future. They talked about building another room onto the house, about buying more cattle, about all the dreams they could now share. In May, Beatrice realized she was pregnant. She had missed her monthly courses and felt queasy in the mornings, and when she confided her suspicions to Zachary, he picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "A baby," he kept saying, like he could not quite believe it. "We are going to have a baby." "We are," Beatrice said, her own happiness bubbling up like a spring. "Are you happy?" "Happy does not even begin to cover it," he said, kissing her soundly. "You have given me everything, Beatrice. A home, a family, a reason to wake up grateful every morning." "I love you so much it scares me sometimes." "I love you too," she said, "and I am not scared at all, not anymore." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer and into the fall. Beatrice's body changed and grew, and Zachary treated her like she was made of spun glass, constantly fussing over her and trying to do all her chores himself. She finally had to put her foot down and insist that she was pregnant, not dying, and that she was perfectly capable of gathering eggs and making dinner. "I just want to take care of you," Zachary said, looking wounded. "And I appreciate that," Beatrice said, taking his hand and placing it on her swollen belly where their baby was doing acrobatics. "But you take care of me best by treating me like myself, not like an invalid." So Zachary backed off a little, though Beatrice noticed he still jumped up to help her whenever she needed to reach something high or carry something heavy. It was endearing, really, and she loved him all the more for it. Their son was born on a cold November night in 1876, with the same midwife who had delivered half the babies in the county attending. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Beatrice thought she might not survive it. But Zachary never left her side, holding her hand and wiping her forehead and murmuring encouragement until finally, just before dawn, their baby entered the world with a lusty cry. "It is a boy," the midwife announced, placing the squalling infant on Beatrice's chest. "And he has got good lungs, that is for certain." Beatrice looked down at her son, at his red face and tiny fists, and felt a love so overwhelming it brought fresh tears to her eyes. Zachary was crying too, unashamed, and when he kissed her forehead and then carefully touched their son's downy head, Beatrice thought her heart might burst from happiness. "What should we name him?" Zachary asked. They had discussed names during the pregnancy but never settled on anything definite. Now, looking at their son, Beatrice knew exactly what felt right. "Thomas," she said. "After my grandfather, he was a good man, and I want our son to carry that legacy." "Thomas Vance," Zachary said, testing it out. "I like it. Hello, Thomas. Welcome to the world, little man." Thomas was a hungry baby and a vocal one, and those first few months were exhausting in a way that Beatrice had not anticipated. She and Zachary took turns walking the floor with him at night, and there were times when she felt so tired she could barely think straight. But there were also moments of transcendent joy, like the first time Thomas smiled, or when he started to recognize them and would kick his little legs excitedly when they came into view. As Thomas grew, Beatrice watched Zachary transform into a father, and it was beautiful to witness. Zachary was patient and playful, singing songs and making silly faces to earn Thomas's laughter. He built a cradle with his own hands, carving little horses into the headboard, and he spent his evenings telling Thomas stories about the ranch and the animals, even though the baby was far too young to understand. The years rolled by, marked by the changing seasons and the small milestones of their growing family. Thomas took his first steps, said his first words, and grew into a sturdy little boy with his father's gray eyes and his mother's determination. The ranch prospered under Zachary's careful management, and they were able to add onto the house, creating more space for their growing family. When Thomas was 3, Beatrice gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Clara. She had Beatrice's dark hair and a sunny disposition that charmed everyone who met her. 2 years after Clara came another son, whom they named James, and then 2 years after that, another daughter, Grace. The house that had once felt too large for just Beatrice and Zachary was now full of noise and laughter, and the chaotic energy of 4 children. Beatrice's days were consumed with cooking and cleaning and breaking up fights and answering 1,000 questions, but she would not have traded it for anything. This was the life she had dreamed of, the family she had longed for during those dark days after her mother's death. Zachary was a wonderful father, involved and affectionate, and as the children grew, he taught them everything he knew about ranching and animals and the land. Thomas, as the oldest, took his responsibilities seriously and often helped his father with the harder chores. Clara was fearless and adventurous, always climbing trees or chasing after the ranch dogs. James was quieter, more contemplative, happy to spend hours watching the clouds or studying insects. Grace was the baby, sweet and silly, with a laugh that could brighten the darkest day. On a warm summer evening in 1884, when Thomas was 8 and Grace was 2, the family gathered on the porch after dinner to watch the sunset. The children were playing a game with sticks and rocks, their laughter ringing out across the yard, and Beatrice sat in her rocking chair with Grace on her lap, feeling a deep sense of contentment. Zachary settled into the chair beside her, reaching over to take her hand. His hair was starting to show threads of silver at the temples, and there were lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun. But to Beatrice, he was as handsome as the day she met him. "Happy?" he asked, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. "More than I ever thought possible," she said. "Sometimes I think about that day in the trading post, and I can hardly believe how much has changed." "You were so brave," Zachary said. "Standing there with your chin up even though your whole world was falling apart. I knew right then that you were someone special." "I was terrified," Beatrice admitted. "But then you came along and saved me." "I did not save you," Zachary said, shaking his head. "I just gave you an opportunity. You saved yourself by being strong enough to take it, by choosing to trust me even though you had every reason not to." "We saved each other," Beatrice said. "That is the truth of it." Zachary smiled and brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "I suppose we did." Grace squirmed in Beatrice's lap, demanding to be let down so she could join her siblings, and Beatrice obliged, watching as the little girl toddled over to where Thomas was building something elaborate with the sticks. The older boy was patient with his baby sister, showing her how to stack the sticks just so, and Beatrice felt her heart swell with pride. "They are good kids," Zachary said, following her gaze. "They have a good father," Beatrice said. "You have given them everything they need to grow up strong and kind." "We have given them that," Zachary corrected. "You are the heart of this family, Beatrice. Everything good that happens here flows from you." Beatrice felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears. After all these years, Zachary could still make her feel cherished and valued with just a few words. The sun sank lower, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, and the children's laughter became softer as they tired themselves out with their playing. One by one, Zachary carried them inside to get ready for bed, and Beatrice followed, helping them wash up and change into their night clothes. The bedtime routine was well practiced, with stories read and prayers said and kisses distributed, and finally the house settled into peaceful quiet. Beatrice and Zachary stood in the doorway of the children's room, watching them sleep, and Zachary slipped his arm around her waist. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what? For this. For them. For choosing to build a life with me." "There is nowhere else I would rather be," Beatrice said, leaning into his warmth. "And no one else I would rather be with." They went to their own room, the one they had shared for nearly 9 years, and made love with the easy familiarity of long partnership. Afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, Beatrice thought about the journey that had brought her here. From the humiliation of being sold for a sack of flour, to the joy of being loved and cherished by a good man, from despair to hope, from loneliness to belonging. The years continued to pass, as years do, bringing both challenges and triumphs. There were hard winters when they struggled to keep the cattle alive, and dry summers when the creek ran low and they worried about the crops. There were illnesses and injuries, the normal trials of life on a ranch in the frontier. But through it all, Beatrice and Zachary faced everything together, their love deepening and maturing like fine wine. Thomas grew into a tall, serious young man who took over more and more of the ranch work as Zachary's back began to trouble him. Clara became a skilled horsewoman and announced at 15 that she intended to train horses professionally, much to her father's pride. James discovered a love of learning and talked about becoming a teacher, and Grace showed early signs of artistic talent, constantly drawing pictures of the ranch and the animals. When Beatrice turned 40 in 1895, Zachary threw her a surprise party, inviting their neighbors and friends from Spokane. The house was filled with people and laughter and music, and Beatrice danced with her husband under the stars, feeling young and cherished despite the silver in her hair. "I cannot believe you managed to keep this a secret," she said as Zachary spun her around to the tune someone was playing on a fiddle. "I am full of surprises," he said with a grin, "even after 20 years. Nearly 20 years, she corrected. Our anniversary is next month." "I know," he said, "and I have something special planned for that too. Zachary Vance, you are going to spoil me." "That is the plan," he said, pulling her close. "I intend to spend the rest of my life spoiling you, making up for that terrible day when you were treated like you had no value." "That day brought me to you," Beatrice said, "so I cannot regret it entirely." "Still," Zachary said, his expression growing serious, "you deserved better than that. You deserved to be cherished from the beginning." "I am cherished now," Beatrice said, reaching up to cup his cheek. "That is what matters." For their 20th anniversary, Zachary took Beatrice on a trip to Seattle, leaving the children in Thomas's capable care. It was the first time they had been away from the ranch together in years, and it felt strange and wonderful to have time just for themselves. They stayed in a proper hotel with electric lights and indoor plumbing, luxuries that seemed almost decadent after the simplicity of ranch life. They walked along the waterfront, watching the ships come and go, and ate dinner in a fancy restaurant where the waiter spoke with a French accent, and the food was arranged on the plates like little works of art. They went to the theater and saw a play, and Beatrice held Zachary's hand in the darkness, marveling at the life they had built together. On their last night in Seattle, as they lay in the hotel bed listening to the sounds of the city outside, Zachary turned to her with that same intensity she remembered from the night he first told her he loved her. "I want you to know something," he said. "These 20 years with you have been the best years of my life. Before you, I was just existing, going through the motions. But you gave me a reason to truly live. You gave me love and family and purpose. I could never repay you for that." "You do not need to repay me," Beatrice said, her voice thick with emotion, "because you gave me the same things. You gave me a life worth living when I thought I had nothing. You gave me hope and love and a future. We gave those things to each other." "Then we are even," Zachary said, kissing her softly. "We are," Beatrice agreed. They returned to the ranch rejuvenated, ready to face whatever the future held. The children were growing up, becoming their own people, and Beatrice felt the bittersweet ache of watching them spread their wings. Thomas started courting a girl from a neighboring ranch, and Beatrice recognized the look in his eyes as the same one Zachary used to get when he looked at her. Clara left to apprentice with a horse trainer in Oregon, and though Beatrice missed her desperately, she was proud of her daughter's independence and ambition. James did indeed become a teacher, taking a position at the schoolhouse in Spokane, and Grace went to study art in Portland, sending home letters filled with descriptions of the things she was learning and the people she was meeting. The house felt too quiet with just Beatrice and Zachary, but they adjusted, rediscovering the rhythms of couplehood they had first established all those years ago. In 1898, Thomas married his sweetheart, a kind young woman named Sarah, and they built a small house on the ranch property. A year later, they gave Beatrice and Zachary their first grandchild, a baby girl named Emma. Holding Emma for the first time, Beatrice thought about how much her life had changed since that terrible day in the trading post. She had gone from being sold like property to being a grandmother, surrounded by love and family. "Look at you," Zachary said, coming to stand beside her as she rocked Emma. "A grandmother, though you do not look nearly old enough for the title." "Flatterer," Beatrice said, but she was smiling. "Can you believe it? Our grandson Thomas has a daughter of his own." "Our son Thomas," Zachary corrected gently. "Not grandson, right?" Beatrice said, laughing at her mistake. "I am getting old and confused." "You are getting old and beautiful," Zachary said. "There is a difference." More grandchildren followed over the years. Clara married a horse trainer and had twin boys who were as wild and adventurous as their mother. James married a fellow teacher and had 3 daughters who loved to read. Grace married an artist she met in Portland and had a son they named Zachary, which made Beatrice's husband tear up with pride and joy. The ranch continued to prosper, and when Beatrice turned 50 in 1905, she looked around at the gathered family and felt a gratitude so profound it bordered on religious. Her children were happy and successful, her grandchildren were healthy and loved, and she was still married to the man who had given her everything. Zachary was 61 now, his hair fully silver, his body showing the wear of decades of hard work. But his eyes were still the same stormy gray, and when he looked at Beatrice, she still felt that flutter in her chest that she had felt as a young woman falling in love. They had survived so much together. Hard winters and dry summers, financial worries and health scares, the normal trials of raising a family in a harsh land. Through it all, they had held unto each other, their love the constant that made everything else bearable. One evening when they were alone on the porch watching another spectacular sunset, Zachary said something that surprised her. "I found her." "Found who?" Beatrice asked, confused. "My sister," Zachary said. "Rebecca, I finally found her." Beatrice sat up straight, her heart racing. "What, when? How?" "I have been corresponding with a marshal in Montana for the past year," Zachary said. "I never told you because I did not want to get your hopes up or mine, but he finally tracked her down. She is alive, Beatrice. She is alive and living in Billings with her husband and children. The trapper she was sold to died years ago and she remarried a merchant. She is happy." Tears streamed down Beatrice's face. She knew how much Zachary had grieved for his lost sister, how the guilt and worry had haunted him all these years. "Are you going to see her?" she asked. "I already did," Zachary admitted. "I took a trip last month when I said I was going to Spokane to look at bulls. I went to Montana instead. I saw her, Beatrice. I got to meet her children and her husband. I got to tell her I was sorry for not protecting her all those years ago." "What did she say?" "She said there was nothing to forgive, that she had made peace with the past and built a good life despite the difficult beginning. She reminded me a lot of you, actually. Same strength, same resilience." "I wish you had told me," Beatrice said. "I would have gone with you." "I know," Zachary said, "but I needed to do it alone first. I needed to face that old guilt and let it go. And now that I have, now that I know she is all right, I feel like I can finally breathe properly." "I am so happy for you," Beatrice said, taking his hand. "And for her. You both deserve to find each other again." "She wants to meet you," Zachary said. "And the children and grandchildren. I told her about our life, about how we met and fell in love. She said she wants to thank you for making me happy." "I would love to meet her," Beatrice said. Rebecca visited the next spring, a handsome woman in her 50s with eyes like Zachary's and a warm smile. She and Beatrice took to each other immediately, and Rebecca stayed for a month, getting to know the family and marveling at the life her brother had built. "When he told me how you met, I cried for a week," Rebecca told Beatrice one afternoon as they shelled peas on the porch. "Not sad tears, but happy ones. Because I know exactly what it feels like to be in that position, to be treated like you have no value. And I know how rare it is to find someone who sees you for who you really are and loves you anyway." "Your brother is a good man," Beatrice said. "He is," Rebecca agreed. "And you are a good woman. I am so glad he found you." The years continued their inexorable march forward, bringing changes both welcome and difficult. Beatrice and Zachary grew older, their bodies slowing down but their minds still sharp, their love still strong. They celebrated 50 years of marriage in 1925, surrounded by 3 generations of family. And Beatrice looked around at the sea of faces and marveled at the legacy they had created. Their children were now in their 40s and 50s, successful and happy in their own right. Their grandchildren were starting families of their own, and there were even a few great-grandchildren toddling around. The ranch had been divided among Thomas and his sons, and it continued to thrive under their capable management. Zachary's health began to fail in the winter of 1926. He developed a cough that would not go away, and the doctor said his heart was weak. Beatrice nursed him as carefully as she had nursed their children through childhood illnesses, and Zachary bore his decline with the same quiet dignity he had shown throughout his life. On a cold February morning, with snow falling softly outside the window, Zachary called Beatrice to his bedside. She sat beside him, holding his hand, and he looked at her with those gray eyes she had loved for more than 50 years. "I need you to promise me something," he said, his voice weak but determined. "Anything," Beatrice said, fighting back tears. "Promise me you will not grieve too long, that you will keep living, keep enjoying this beautiful life we built together. I need to know you will be all right." "I promise," Beatrice said, though the words felt like they were tearing her apart. "But you are not going anywhere yet, we still have time." "Maybe a little," Zachary said, "but not much. And I want to spend it telling you how much I love you, how grateful I am for every single day we had together. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, Beatrice Vance, the very best thing." "You were my everything," Beatrice said, the tears finally spilling over. "You saved me and gave me a life I could never have imagined. I love you so much." "I know," Zachary said, reaching up with trembling fingers to wipe her tears. "I have always known, and I will carry that love with me wherever I go next." Zachary died peacefully in his sleep 3 days later, with Beatrice holding his hand and their children gathered around the bed. He was 77 years old, and he had lived a good life, a meaningful life, filled with love and purpose. Beatrice grieved deeply, as anyone would after losing the love of their life, but she kept her promise to Zachary. She continued to live fully, spending time with her children and grandchildren, tending the garden, taking walks through the ranch land that she and Zachary had built together. She told stories about him to the great-grandchildren who had never met him, making sure they knew what kind of man he had been. She lived another 12 years, dying peacefully in her sleep at the age of 83 in the spring of 1938. Her children and grandchildren mourned her passing but celebrated the incredible life she had lived, the strength and grace she had shown in the face of adversity. They buried her next to Zachary on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a big pine tree where they used to sit together and watch the sunsets. The headstone was simple but perfect, reading, "Beatrice Vance, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and friend. She turned flower into a feast." And so the story ended as all stories must, with death but also with life, with loss but also with love. The ranch continued on, passed down through the generations, a testament to what Beatrice and Zachary had built together. Their descendants thrived, carrying forward the values of hard work and integrity and love that they had instilled. The trading post where Beatrice was sold for a sack of flour was torn down years ago, replaced by a modern building that bore no trace of the terrible transaction that had taken place there. But the ranch remained solid and enduring, a monument to the truth that sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead to the best ones, that redemption is possible, and that love, real love, can transform everything. Beatrice Harper had been sold like property, treated as though she had no value, but Zachary Vance had seen her worth and given her the chance to build a life that mattered. And together, they had created something beautiful and lasting, a legacy of love that would endure long after they were both gone. Their story became family legend, passed down through the generations, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope can survive, and that sometimes the most unlikely beginnings can lead to the most extraordinary endings. The ranch still stands today, though it looks different than it did in Beatrice and Zachary's time. Modern equipment has replaced the old tools, and conveniences they could never have imagined are commonplace. But the land is still the same, rolling hills stretching toward the mountains, the same sky overhead, the same wind whispering through the grass. And sometimes, if you listen carefully on a quiet evening, you can almost hear the echoes of laughter from long ago, the sound of children playing, the murmur of two voices talking softly on the porch as the sun sets in brilliant colors. Their love story was not one of grand gestures or sweeping drama, but of quiet moments and steady devotion, of choosing each other every single day for more than 50 years. It was a love built on respect and partnership, on shared dreams and mutual support. And it was a love that proved that sometimes the greatest romances are the ones that start in the darkest places, because they have nowhere to go but up, and because the people who find love in adversity cherish it all the more fiercely. Beatrice never saw her father again after that day in the trading post, though she heard through mutual acquaintances that he drank himself to death within a year. She felt sadness at his passing but no real grief, because the man she mourned, the father she remembered from childhood, had died long before his body did. She forgave him eventually, not for his sake but for her own, letting go of the anger and hurt so they would not poison the beautiful life she had built. And she never forgot what it felt like to be powerless, to be treated as less than human. That memory informed how she treated others throughout her life, with kindness and respect regardless of their station. She passed that lesson on to her children, who passed it to theirs, creating ripples of compassion that extended far beyond what she could have imagined. The sack of flour that she had been traded for was used up within a month, turned into bread and biscuits and pancakes that sustained her worthless father for a brief time before he needed to barter for more supplies. It was gone and forgotten, as meaningless as the transaction it represented. But the love that grew from that terrible day, the family that blossomed from that unlikely beginning, that endured and flourished and became something truly valuable. In the end, that was the real story. Not the tragedy of being sold, but the triumph of being saved, not by a man on a white horse or a fairy tale prince, but by a good man with a kind heart who saw someone in need and chose to help. And in helping her, Zachary had helped himself, finding the family and love he had been seeking since his own sister was torn away from him. They had healed each other, built each other up, created something beautiful out of pain and loss. And that, more than any grand adventure or dramatic rescue, was the truest kind of love story. The kind that lasts not just for a lifetime, but for generations, echoing through the years in the faces of children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, who carry forward the legacy of two people who refused to let tragedy define them. Beatrice had been sold for a sack of flour, but Zachary had given her a life worth living, and together they had created a love worth remembering. And in the end, that was all that mattered.